Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. This is Ashley Nate. You're tuning in for Talk Real Estate Tuesday, where I come on my page live every Tuesday to share with you relevant real estate information, tips, fun stuff, and all that jazz. So, I hope you're all staying warm out there on this freezing cold day. And I'm really excited about this particular live and the next few that I'm going to do because we're going to kind of switch gears for a bit over onto the investing side. I've talked a lot about different things having to do with real estate data, purchasing your first home, those sorts of things. But what I want to talk about today is real estate investing. And my husband and I have some experience in this. We've done a lot of different things in real estate, but one thing we've done is rental properties. We have a fiveplex in town. We also have a few single family rentals that are currently seller financed, but kind of work the same or similar as a single family rental. So what I want to do is just walk through just kind of real candidly how to analyze what the potential monthly cash flow would be on a rental property. Say you see something on the market and you're like, I wonder if that would be a good deal. And sometimes you kind of have to put some numbers to paper, and something that might have looked like a really good deal when you actually crunch the numbers ends up not being it. And sometimes things might surprise you. But I want to walk through kind of what I do, just a super simplistic way to kind of say, does this have potential to make sense or not? Okay, so let's get to it. Guess what? I am back again with my little trusty whiteboard. So sorry if you're on Instagram, I know it shows it backwards, but you can listen to me too and you'll get the gist of it. Okay, so the first of all, like I said, we're going to be doing monthly cash flow. So we're looking at what would this potentially cash flow on a monthly basis. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do when we analyze this is we are going to start with, as I'm sure you probably guessed, is your gross rents. So that is the total amount of rent money that is being paid to you each month for all units. So if it's a single family, just whatever the rent is they're paying. If it's a multifamily, then you're going to add up the rents of all units, and that is your gross rent, your total amount of cash that you're bringing in. Next, from there, you are going to subtract off your mortgage payment, which is just talking about your principal and interest on the property. So an easy way to come to this number is, honestly, you can just Google mortgage calculator and you can find lots of them that will do this work for you in order to calculate what the mortgage payment is. And you can talk to a lender about some different options in terms of what the structure of that might be. For an investment loan, you might see 15% down and a little bit higher than what your standard interest rate is for residential. If you're doing a commercial loan, I believe that's 25% down. If you were doing a situation where you were going to house hack this rental property, meaning that you are going to live in one of the units of it, then you could go the route of more traditional financing. You could do an FHA loan for 3.5% down and get a good interest rate on that if you're planning to live in the property. So in terms of what the terms would be, you can chat with a lender about that. But long story short, next thing that would come off would be the mortgage, just referring to the principal and interest. Use a mortgage calculator to figure out what that would be, typing in the terms that you have came up with. Okay, next you are going to subtract off your property taxes. For your property taxes, what you can do is you can look up the county assessor site. So whatever county that property is in, Google that county assessor website. You'll be able to put in the address and look up what those annual property taxes are. Divide them by 12, obviously, to get to the monthly property taxes. Next, you are going to take off your property insurance. This is a little bit harder, I found, to figure out a good estimate of what this would be. I did read that the national average is $119 per month on a $250,000 house. So you can kind of use that as a baseline. For us, our fiveplex, I believe, is about $180 a month. Our single family is about I want to say it's 132. So kind of somewhere in that like $150 a month range is what I found, unless you're starting to get into higher dollar amounts for the property value. So take off your insurance. From there, you are going to take off your property management fees if you are doing property management. If you're self-managing, then you would have zero for that. Normally it's 10% give or take of your gross rents that you're gonna pay for property management fees. All right, next, you are going to take off your landlord paid utilities. Kind of running out of space there, but your landlord paid utilities. So if your tenant is paying for the utilities, you don't need to subtract those off because you're not paying those, the tenant is paying them. But sometimes you'll have a case where the landlord does pay a few of the utilities. For example, for our fiveplex in town, it is not individually metered, so we pay for the utilities and that is factored into what we charge for rent. A lot of other places, you'll have it where you might have a duplex where they do have separate units and those tenants are responsible for putting the utilities in their own name and paying them. It doesn't come through you at all. So again, this is only if you are paying the utilities. In many cases, you might not be at all. So this would be another thing that would be zero if you were not doing property management and you didn't have to cover the utilities. So, but just things to think about. So once you do this, I just saw this in a reel the other day, but I thought this was a good way to put it. Once you subtract these off, I saw somebody refer to this as phantom cash flow, because it seems like it's your cash flow because that's what you're getting to take home, but it's probably smart to take some of that money and put that into reserves for things that might happen. So that's why she referred to it as your phantom cash flow. So from there, what would be smart to do is then to subtract off X amount of dollars for your reserves. This is for what are called like capital expenditures. Maybe you need a new roof in the future, things like that. For maintenance and repairs that come up, tenants can be hard on properties they're renting, so you'll want to have some reserves for that, and then also reserves potentially for vacancies. So you can look up different suggestions for what percentage of reserves you could do, but this is something that kind of depends on the property and your risk tolerance, what types of repairs that you foresee it needing in the future. You know, if it's a newer property, you might not need as much reserves as something that is older and has more repairs that are up and coming. So again, you decide what you want to come up with for that reserves number, but then you get down to ultimately your net cash flow, and that is the cash flow that you are taking home. Okay, so gross rents, take off the mortgage, property taxes, insurance, property management if you are getting it, landlord paid utilities if you have utilities that you are paying. There you get your phantom cash flow, store some of that money in reserves, and then ultimately this is your fund money potentially that you get to take home, or put that into savings and roll it into your next investment property if you want to do that. So what I want to do then next is let's take this and walk through an example, and I'm just going to use my hands here to wipe this off. Okay. So last thing here, we're going to go through an example now that you've seen these numbers, because there is a property that just came on the market today that is in Clive. It is a duplex. And so let's say that you saw that property pop up and you're like, I wonder if the numbers on that would make sense for me. Well, let's walk through it and see. So for that property, it said right now, currently, it is pulling in with the current tenants. It is currently occupied. It's pulling in $2,300 a month in rent in the 2 units. I think it said one of the units is $1,000 a month, one of the units is $1,300 a month. Okay, so there's our gross rent. From that, we're going to take off our mortgage payment. So let's see here how I calculated this. I already calculated it, but let's say that you did an investment loan at 15% down, 6% interest over 30 years. And so you'll just have to kind of take my word for it. $1,393 would be the amount of just the principal and interest alone. Okay, so we're taking off our mortgage. From there, we're going to take off the property taxes. The property taxes on this are roughly $376 a month. Okay. From there, we're going to take off our insurance. Like I said, this is always the one that's kind of tricky to figure out. I just put $150. It might be a pinch more than that. It might be a pinch less than that. but it's going to be probably somewhere in that ballpark. So we take off our insurance. Next is where we would take off property management, which is typically about 10% of the gross rents. We're going to pretend that we're not getting it property managed. We just got 2 units. We're just going to run them and manage them ourselves. That's what we do. If I could do it with 5 units, you can do it with 2, but it's all in the numbers and what you're willing to take on. So no property management. Next, landlord paid utilities. Those utilities are individually metered and the tenant pays for them themselves. I also read that the tenant does some of the lawn care and maintenance and things like that too. So you do not have utilities on this either. So we don't have to worry about taking that off. So if I subtract this off, here is my phantom cash flow. So $381 each month is my phantom cash flow. And then it's probably a good idea from there to put some money into reserves. And so if we said that, let's just say for an example, we are going to do 10% of our gross rent to put in reserves, which would be $230 per month that we're going to save away. And again, this is up to you how much you want to put away, but 10% might be a good number there. So if we subtract that off, then our net cash flow is $151 a month using the criteria that I put in, okay? So this particular property, if we go through and we crunch the numbers on this, it's really not a cash flow property. So you're gonna find when you analyze properties that some properties are cash flow properties, or and some are more what you will hear people say buy and hold properties. So in this case, you're not buying this property to be rolling in the dough on a monthly basis with your cash flow. You're only making $151 in net cash flow a month. So if you were looking for a property where you're going to cash flow more, and that was your investment strategy, was trying to find really high cash flowing properties, then obviously this wouldn't be the property for you. Now on the flip side, if that wasn't something that was important to you, you were just kind of getting some properties and you were just going to hang on to them over time, then maybe this would make sense. Because remember what I've talked about time and time again is that appreciation. The long-term appreciation on real estate is 4.2% from 1928 to today. So if you are just sitting back and hanging on to this property for 10, 20, 30 years, after 30 years, this whole property's paid off. And not only that, this property is currently listed for, I believe it's $310,000. If you took that $310,000 times 4.2% appreciation every year, that I should have done that in advance. I did not, but that's going to be worth a lot down the road. So you're still getting that appreciation, and you're not the one that's paying off the mortgage on this anyways. It's being paid down by the tenants, which is the beauty of owning rental properties. So again, there's a lot of things to think about, and it really kind of depends on what your goals are and what your strategy is, okay? One last thing I wanted to show here. So I did, like I said, so here's our mortgage payment right here. It was this $1,393, and like I said, I did 15% down, I believe, 6% over 30 years. For one, I want to mention, if you didn't need to get a mortgage, maybe you were a cash buyer, or if you were able to put a lot more down on that property, then you can lower that mortgage amount, which would then up your cash flow amount down here. So that might be another instance where this would make more sense for somebody who had cash, like a cash buyer. Then, hey, maybe this is a great rental property for them because they could really boost that cash flow. So that was the first thing I wanted to mention, is that here's our mortgage. More money put down or no mortgage at all is obviously going to have an impact on this bottom line. But the other thing I wanted to mention is going back to what I had said at the beginning about house hacking. So house hacking is when you would live in one unit and then you rent out the other unit, okay? So let's say that, and with that, you don't have to necessarily do an investment loan, so you can put less down if you go through primary financing. So let's say that with this, you went out and you got an FHA loan with 3.5% down. And there's a lot of great programs too that could cover almost all of that down payment. There's a lot of grants that are available that could cover a good portion of that and your closing costs. But let's say you did a FHA loan, you put the minimum amount down over 30 years. FHA loans, if you did like a Iowa Finance Authority grant, they have really great interest rates. Let's say you did that. Since you're not putting very much down, this number is going to go up. So I calculated it to, if we took all of these, our mortgage, our property tax, and our interest, and we did 3.5% down, this is ballpark. For me, when I ran the numbers, it would be somewhere in the like 2150 per month for the entire mortgage payment, including property taxes and insurance. Now, this seems like a lot, but let's say that you bought this and then you're renting out the other side, and you're renting out the other side, say right now it's at 1300, you boost that to 1500. So you're paying this, you're renting out the other side for $1,500 a month. So you only have the remaining $650 a month to pay for that mortgage payment, which is less than anywhere you're going to find rent in the metro area. And you're paying down the principal and you're gaining appreciation. So you sit there for maybe 3, 4, 5 years, pay down some principal, build some appreciation, and then what you can do is you can refinance money out of that, go buy another house and stick a tenant where you were, and boom, you have a rental property. And you can move on to your next primary residence or whatever your strategy is there moving forward. But I wanted to point that out too, just to show that example with this property. So again, this is just one example of a property in Clive that's listed for 310. It is, I will say, it's kind of hard to find like decent looking multifamilies that pop up actually on the market in the metro, but you'll see them come on every once in a while. So I thought that was a good opportunity to walk through that today, so you can kind of see how my brain works in looking at these numbers and trying to figure out what makes sense. And what makes sense for me might not make sense for somebody else, or what makes sense for somebody else might not make sense for me or this investor. It really depends on your strategy and the numbers, the loan, what you're looking for, what your goals are, and that sort of thing. So anyways, I hope that this was helpful. It was kind of fun to go over, bringing back my old teacher skills again. For those of you that didn't know, I was a high school business teacher for 8 years, but I'm going to hop back on next Tuesday, and I think we're going to continue on with some more investing sort of topics. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out. I will say one more thing. I actually have a great deal analyzer that I use that I created in Google Sheets. I am willing to share that to anybody who would like to use it. I just sat down with an investor client the other day and was able to give him that to start crunching some numbers. So if you would like that, reach out. I'm happy to send that to you. And I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next week, and get out there and analyze some properties, get some practice, and reach out if you have questions. We'll see ya.